This is KLEK Jonesboro, the voice of Arkansas Minority Advocacy Council.
Jonesboro's community radio station.
Your life,
your music.
KLEK 102.5 FM.
Good Thursday morning, Jonesboro. This is meteorologist Tim Root with your KLEK 1 to 2.5 forecast. It'll be partly to mostly cloudy today and tonight. A few rain showers expected today, and the high temperature in the low 70s and the overnight temperature about 55 to 60. More sunshine developing in the forecast for Friday and the weekend. Should be pretty good Friday through the weekend. Highs around 80 Friday, in the 80s over the weekend. Be sure to tune in during the month of October for the debates between local candidates running for office, starting with the candidates for mayor of Jonesboro, debating October 1st at 9 a.m. Your life, your music, we're KLEK 1 to 2.5 FM.
From Feature Story News in London, I'm Ollie Barrett. US President Donald Trump's refused to commit to a peaceful transition if Joe Biden wins the election in November. 2 policemen have been shot in Louisville during protests over a decision not to charge police officers over the killing of Breonna Taylor. The man at the centre of the investigation into the disappearance of Madeleine McCann's lost an appeal to have a separate jail sentence overturned, and the UK's announced a new COVID-19 job support scheme to pay part of workers' wages.
It's 9:02.
KLEK LP Jonesboro, the voice of Arkansas Minority Advocacy Council. It's now time for Community Conversations, a program focusing on the people working to make the Jonesboro community a better place, while offering viewpoints from all sides of the issues. The views expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of KLEK 102.5 FM, the voice of Arkansas Minority Advocacy Council, or our underwriters or sponsors.
KLEK 102.5 FM. Good morning to you on your Thursday. It's September 24th, 2020. This is Community Conversations. Kara Wonder is in the studio with you. I'm joined by Gabila Jones via phone, host of Community Conversations, and our special guest today is Jim Burton. He is the Democratic candidate for Arkansas State Representative District 58, and of course KLEK and the voice of Arkansas Minority Advocacy Council. We do not endorse, support, or oppose any candidate for office. These interviews are provided for informational purposes only, but we definitely encourage you to exercise your right to vote. Election day is November 3rd. Your last day to get registered to vote is October 5th, but that's a Saturday, so go ahead and make sure you get it done a little bit before then. If you're concerned about COVID-19, go ahead and request your absentee ballot, preferably dropping it back off at the clerk's office, but if you do have to mail it back as soon as possible. But we just want you to exercise your right to vote. It is more important than ever. So with that being said, we want to welcome Jim to the studio today. So as always, Jim, start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Okay, well, I've...
Put that mic a little closer to you.
Okay.
And tilt it up just a bit.
You have to compensate for the masks.
Hey, I have to do it too.
Absolutely.
I have to almost yell into this thing.
My family and my wife and I have lived here, our family, we've lived here for 42 years.
As long as I've been alive.
Yeah, well, we got married in 1980. I started practicing law here in 1978. Before that, I taught 2 years out at ASU when I first got out of law school full-time, and then got my law practice opened in 78. My wife and I met and married in 1980. Been here ever since. During that period of time, I've built up a law practice here, principally in the areas of personal injury and workers' comp and social security disability, mainly in all those areas, helping people who've been hurt somehow and or injured and disabled. In addition to that, in terms of public affairs, I served 5 years as Jonesboro City Attorney in the late 80s and early 90s, and as a city prosecutor during that period of time. After that, I served 5 years on the state. I call it the Judicial District Jail Board for the 2nd Judicial District, and that mainly involved inspecting and helping the counties in the 2nd Judicial District to maintain incarceration facilities that were constitutional, and so that the counties met the requirements and didn't get sued over things. And during that period, we also expanded the Craighead County Jail, and the Greene County built a new jail after after our work up there. In addition to that, well, let me see. In 2010, we almost had to cut the police force by 1/3 and the fire department by 1/3, and the mayor appointed Skip Mooney Jr., who's now going on the circuit bench, and me, to lead a campaign here in Jonesboro to get an emergency sales tax. We were able to do that. We weren't forced to lay off any firemen or policemen. And this was especially important because the city was growing rapidly at that point. Give you an idea, when I came to town, Jonesboro had 25,000 people, maybe 30.
Had 46 when I got here.
Yeah. And now we're nudging on 90. And I like to say I want to live long enough to see it hit 100. I don't know if I'll do that or not.
We're going to claim that. We're going to claim that.
It's a good hope. We will claim that. Thank you. And the most recent thing I've been doing for the city is is working as chairman of the Sky Cops Committee. Now, it's got a much longer name than that, but that's kind of what we call it. And that is of course, a CCTV, as the British call it, system to enable, really to stretch out an overstretched police force. It's a less expensive way. Right now, Jonesboro has about, we're nudging on a couple of hundred uniformed officers. We probably could use twice that number. But, you know, that would blow a hole through the budget like you can't imagine. And these camera systems, and you can identify them as you drive around the city, because if you see some kind of a unit, a box up on a telephone pole or power pole with a blue light, looks just like a blue police car light.
And they have the JPD logo on there.
And they have the logo, the JPD logo on there, and you know that is one of these units, and a full array unit which can do some remarkable things in addition to just photographing an area and recording video from an area. It can also capture license plates. It can also, if it's fully equipped, and a fully equipped one runs about $8,000 a unit. A fully equipped one can also, I don't know how else to put it, it can discriminate among sounds. It can hear gunfire.
Mm-hmm. And we've had Chief Elliott talk about those machines and their capabilities, and that was one of them, being able to take gunshots, license plates, and things of that nature as well.
And so we're going to be, we're going to be trying to do everything we can to obtain additional monies for that, the same way the police have handled the DARE program or handled the bulletproof vest for police dogs, whatever it might be, by trying to get the community to, to volunteer to contribute to these things. And I don't know what's going to be available through the state, but if I'm fortunate to be elected to this seat, that's one of the things I'm going to try to focus on.
So why did you want to run for a state representative?
Well, I've been here long enough, and I have seen the city change and grow. When I was city attorney in 1990, we did, through Mayor Brodell, we did an enormous annexation, and we took in about 75 square miles surrounding the city, which at that point, if you were driving in from Memphis, one of the first things you'd see out on the bypass before you got to any hotels was a great big ugly trailer park. And we were able to expand zoning and be able to develop the city of Jonesboro into the shape that it's in now, the physical dimensions that it has, and to try to establish traffic routes and to try to just generally enhance the character of the city through zoning and the Board of Adjustment and zoning enforcement. With this background in city government, I have a feeling that there are, and a sense that there are things that I can do at the state level that will be helpful to this city. Because I talk a lot in terms of the city simply because District 58 is entirely encompassed within the limits of the city of Jonesboro. You know, it starts up here just east of us at Stadium, runs west over to Flint, and then goes south out Wood Street and Wood Springs Road and crosses the bypass over into the Paula Drive neighborhood, and then out into some of the northern areas of the growing Valley View area. So it's entirely a city district, and I think of it in those terms. And I think of the citizens of Jonesboro, whether I'm doing something here in the city or whether I get to serve in the legislature as my principal constituents.
All right, we're going to go ahead and go to Kabila for our first question.
Okay, good morning. How are you?
Good morning.
All right, so I hear you talk about, different things that can benefit the city, and that is important to me as well. So if you are elected, what are some either current bills, laws, or things that are on the books that you would like to see either changed or revamped, or changed, eliminated, just done over in reference to Arkansas and more specifically Jonesboro when it comes to law enforcement, crime?
Yeah. Are you concerned about crime here?
Because I live on the north side of town. I lived here for 20 plus years. So
yes, ma'am.
Yes, of course I'm concerned about crime.
Okay.
Well, I think any decent person would be.
Well, sure. One of the things, like I say, in addition to trying to see if I can find funding to help the Sky Cops Committee, to help the police and fire department to grow here, to keep up with a growing population, that's a tremendous problem that we have. I'm also troubled by the kinds of crime that I'm seeing. Our family live up on Nettleton, and I know back in the spring there were several shootings up on Vine Street, only a few blocks away from our home. The other night, if you saw it on Channel 8, there were two vehicles racing down Red Wolf. Occupants of those vehicles shooting at each other, and resulted in a rollover collision. These are frightful occurrences. They didn't used to happen here, and they are, unfortunately, they are part of a consequence of a growing population of Jonesboro turning from a large town into a city. And these are things that have to be addressed. One way I think they can be addressed, and I don't know if I can get everybody in the legislature to agree with me on this, because not every city is surrounded by towns that are struggling. And the upshot of that is you have, and I haven't got numbers on this yet. I've intended to ask the police chief for it, and I just haven't been able to do it. I would like to see numbers on how many criminal defendants over the past, say, 4 years came into Jonesboro, came into Craighead County from another county to commit crime. I think that this is a gap in the law. Certainly, right now there are federal laws if one person travels from one state to another to commit a crime. I think by way of analogy, if people are coming from an area outside of Jonesboro for the reason of committing some criminal act, whether that be robbery, whether it be burglary, whatever it is, that somehow should carry sentencing by way of an additional offense. Call it making a criminal journey. Call it crossing a county line to commit crime.
Well, currently one of the things, at least here in Jonesboro, that Chief Elliott has mentioned is that with certain crimes that they charge on the federal level to ensure that those perpetrators actually serve the maximum time. Of course, on the federal level, you don't get out early for good behavior. You serve every single day that you're sentenced to. So, at least here in Jonesboro, Chief Elliott are making those steps. I understand that if you are elected, that may be something you may want to maybe look at possibly on the state level.
Sure.
All right. So, Jim, my next question is, what do you think is the number one issue that is facing the area of District 50? We've talked about crime, but besides that, what do you see as the biggest issue that's facing the district?
That's a tough one. I would say probably the principal areas are the adaptation of Jonesboro to again, this rapid tenor of growth that we are experiencing here. If you go to any major intersection at certain times of day, Main and Nettleton, Highland and Stadium and Southwest Drive, they don't intersect, what am I saying? Highland and Southwest Drive, Stadium and a number of intersections, we are outstripping our traffic grid. Our street and highway grid is outstripping the volume of traffic. There are arteries here in the city that could stand to be raised from 4 to 6 lanes.
Well, it's kind of interesting that you mentioned that, because I remember I went to a highway meeting a couple years ago and live streamed it, and they were talking about the Eastern Arterial, which will become the extension of MLK Drive. And I remember him saying, by the time we get it built, it's already outdated. It's time to start thinking then what do we do next? That's just how quickly the traffic is growing. But I definitely would agree with you that about traffic being bad.
To give you an example of that, up at Hilltop, when I was city attorney, and this is 1990, 30 years ago, there was talk of going on out to Thomas Green Road, which then was in the country, and turning that into a north bypass. Well, if you wanted to have an effective north bypass now, to my way of thinking, you'd start the thing over at Brooklyn, and it'd end at Bono, because everything between that is blossoming.
That may happen. That may happen though.
With neighborhoods. You can do some of these things sometimes with the best of intentions, but you can do them prematurely, which is kind of what's happened to the bypass on the south side.
So let me ask you this. So since we're on this subject, I would assume that you most likely are in favor of issue 1, because that is something that's going to be on the ballot, which is the highway tax.
Yeah.
And since we're talking about the issues, what are your thoughts on issue 2?
Issue 2, you're going to have to help me.
Okay, let me pull up. And by the way, while I'm pulling this, shout out to Gwen Henderson. Thank you for checking in on our Facebook Live feed. Arkansas 2020 ballot measures. So let's look them up. Issue 2 is changes term limits to 12 consecutive years for state legislators with the opportunity to return after a 4-year break.
I don't know. Right now you can serve 8 years in each house. If, for instance, you serve 8 years in the House and then get elected to the state Senate for some reason. I don't know. I'm going to have to think about that one, and I'll tell you why. My concern is that a great deal of time that I have seen spent by previous representatives all over the state is wasted in large measure. There is, I come from a line of work where I work for myself, and I've worked for myself for over 40 years, and that means I've got to push myself to get things done. And I have never seen that as an organizing principle as far as the Arkansas House or Senate are concerned. What I have seen in many instances is the passage of feel-good legislation, which is easy, And the heavy lifting and the hard work oftentimes gets pushed back to the last days of the session and then is assembled hurriedly.
Right.
And like the German statesman Bismarck said once that you really don't want to watch how either law or sausage gets made. And I'm always reminded of that. It's often what happens in the legislature is a rushed hodgepodge. And I would almost like to see the legislature, a speaker, adopt what we call in federal court a scheduling order for proposed legislation. In other words, in a scheduling order, you have to have your depositions done by a certain date. Your interrogatories have to be done by a certain date. You have to submit your witness list by a certain date. And that keeps the cases moving. And I'm not sure that something analogous to that wouldn't be a bad idea in the Arkansas legislature.
All right, so let's go on to issue 3 quickly, as we got a few seconds left in our segment. Issue 3 is the process of changing how people propose amendments to the Constitution.
Well, I think that the if I understand issue 3, it is an attempt to place further limitations on that.
Right.
And I'm opposed to that. And I'll tell you why.
And you got about 40 seconds to do it.
Okay. I'll tell you why. I mean, one of the salient issues of the federal Constitution is the right of the people to petition their lawmakers. And I think initiative and referendum, citizen initiative, is an essential part of a functioning democracy. Just as simple as that.
All right, Jim, we're going to have to leave it there. Speaking with Jim Burton, Democratic candidate for Arkansas State Representative District 53. Shout out to Derek Coleman, who says, good morning, KLEK. Stay with us. Back in a little bit. This is Community Conversations on KLEK 102.5 FM.
You're listening to Community Conversations on KLEK 102.5 FM. We'll be right back.
How do you let your teenagers go but still keep them safe? I'm Mark Merrill with today's Family Minute. Giving teens room to grow while guarding them is a balancing act, but there are some things you simply must know about your teens' friends. First, get to know them. Learn about their friends by having them over to your house. You'll learn a lot through casual conversation. Second, get to know their parents. Introduce yourself to them and try to discern whether they have the same parenting mindset. Third, get to know the details of where your teen and their friends are going, who else will be there, and what they'll be doing. Then, when your teen comes home, be there and be available just in case they want to open up and talk. Remember, your family first.
For more resources on today's topic, go to markmerrill.com. The Family Minute with Mark Merrill, helping families love well.
Made possible by the Kappa Nu Omega chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, a nonprofit organization committed to service to all mankind. KNOMEGA1908.com.
Brought to you by the Jonesboro Alumni Chapter of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated, dedicated to the purpose of achievement. Jonesboro Alumni at gmail.com, Jonesboro AR Alumni Chapter of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity on Facebook, and Jonesboro_Kappas on Instagram.
Starks Auto Plaza and Auto Service, now under one roof. 2829 Redwood Boulevard, serving the Jonesboro community for over 5 years. They offer wholesale pricing to the public on vehicles, financing for everyone, and synthetic blend and full synthetic oil changes with spin-on filter with vehicle inspection included. Starks Auto Plaza, we never say no. 870-203-9980. Details at starksautoplaza.com.
Hello, I'm Officer Jonathan Hagens of the Jonesboro Police Department. One of the best decisions I ever made was to join the Jonesboro Police Department. Since joining, I've had the pleasure to give back, protect, and serve my community. Now I want to let you know about that same opportunity. The Jonesboro Police Department will conduct testing for the patrol officers at the Valley View High School. Applications are available online at jonesboropolice.com. The Jonesboro Police Department offers a competitive salary, health, and retirement benefits, top-of-the-line training, and most importantly, the chance to make a difference in the Jonesboro community. Join me in making Jonesboro a better place. The Jonesboro Police Department is an equal opportunity employer, and women and minorities are especially encouraged to apply. More information, 870-935-5657.
Applications are being accepted. Applications are available at jonesboropolice.com.
And now back to Community Conversations on KLEK 102.5 FM.
And we're back on Community Conversations on KLEK 102.5 FM with our guest, Jim Burton, Democratic candidate for Arkansas State Representative District 50. We're going to go to Quabila for our next question.
Okay, so I want to keep in line a little bit with some of the comments Mr. Jim was just making about the bills and how some things take their time and this, that, and whatever. But also, sometimes we know some things come before the legislative branch.
Yeah.
That can be either controversial. Okay, let's just talk about the stand your ground. Something like that may come back around. But besides that, any other bill that may be controversial or detrimental to the citizens of Arkansas and Jonesboro specifically, will you try your best, if you're elected, to take your time and go through each line of, each page and make sure that the wording is what it needs to be versus just pushing something through because your party or your group, your committee or whatever, wants to push through?
I understand your question, ma'am, and I'm going to, since I've spent my life doing this, I have had to read more documents. You could climb up them to the moon in 42 years of practicing law. Some of it legal, a lot of it medical, which a lot of times you've got to read. I'll tell you this, doctors have their own language, which I've had to learn, and a lot of it is so thick that, thank heaven, I've got a good online legal dictionary. And I will give you this assurance. I will give my best effort to read thoroughly any and every bill that crosses my desk. Now, you get a little bit more education on particular kinds of bills depending on what outside of the full House, depending on what particular committees you get assigned to. But in either situation, I'm not going to let some piece of bad legislation, some piece of special interest, or particular grievance of some member slide through there. I'm going to give my best efforts to read the legislation. I don't plan to be out at night in Little Rock much during that couple of months the legislature's in session. I hope that if I'm elected that they have some office space there in the Capitol. If not, I'm friends with enough lawyers whose offices are in downtown Little Rock that they will give me a place to hide out and a place to hook up my laptop and read bills when the House is not actually in session or I'm not sitting on a committee. In addition to that, I have already talked to my former priest, rather than trying to stay in an apartment down around the Capitol, of rooming in a dorm out at the Diocese of Little Rock. So after I've eaten supper, there's not going to be much for Jim Burton to do except shuffle paper and read legislation. So I'm going to be spending a good deal of time with that. I hope that answers your question. If it doesn't, please ask me another.
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, sir. I appreciate your answer. My concern is, as a resident of Arkansas, and now being more aware of what's happening in terms of laws, proposals, or bills, I should say, I just, would hope that the people that we elect are making the best decisions. And even those we may not have voted for are still keeping people over policy and parties first, especially in Arkansas with the different issues that we face.
Yes, ma'am.
I want to move into another question, if again you doesn't mind.
Well, before you get to your question, got to do a Facebook shout out to Dr. Ray Scales. Appreciate you for checking in on our Facebook Live feed.
Okay. So we know that healthcare is a big topic as well. And Arkansas, again, faces its own challenges. And so we know that with COVID, no matter how you believe, what you feel about it, period, the people who have been diagnosed with it, who are now on the other side of it, have what you call, tell me how again, conditions that
pre-existing conditions.
Yes, that they are now dealing with things that are considered pre-existing conditions as a result of COVID.
Yes, ma'am.
So going forward.
Well, and really to add to that, all of this could be a moot point if the balance of the Supreme Court ends up changing with the person that President Trump is likely to nominate. It's, I believe it's actually going to be an ACA case that's actually going to come before the court before the end of this year, and the newly made-up court may be the ones to handle it. So there is a possibility that the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare, could completely be gone, and pre-existing conditions could come back, and there may be little that could be done on the state level. Jim, your thoughts?
Well, first of all, there are people in the legislature right now who are advocates of doing away with the Medicaid expansion that Governor Beebe enacted and that Governor Hutchinson has wisely continued. There are radical Republicans who want to do away with the insurance coverage of about 250,000 people here in Arkansas. I have come out against that idea. I cannot imagine a worse possible time. I can't imagine doing it in the first place. It's inhumane. But I can't imagine a worse possible time than in the middle of an epidemic to say to 250,000 Arkansans, oh, by the way, you don't have any health insurance anymore.
And Jim, I want to stop you there and ask you this because it's related. So you have some people that say that whenever someone wants to expand access to health care or any kind of public benefit, they label that as socialism. And that seems to be a word that's thrown around a lot, especially when it comes to Democratic candidates such as yourself. So educate the people on your thoughts on that, and because I don't think that you're a socialist. But the word seems to get thrown around a lot for any kind of expansion of any kind of public benefit.
Somebody on my candidate website called me a socialist a week before last, and it was a few days before I got back, and I told him, I said, I'm sorry for being slow in getting back to you, but since I'm a capitalist, I've been busy practicing law. So, don't try to call me a socialist because I'm not one. If you look at the countries that have adopted socialism, it's disastrous in so many respects. What we're talking about here is guaranteeing insurance to people who cannot help themselves, who for some reason would otherwise fall through the cracks and would end up in hospital emergency rooms day in and day out. And those hospitals, whether they're nonprofit or whether they're for-profit organizations, have to make money. And they've got to write all of those cases off as charitable deductions. Now, the other thing that I feel about this, and I feel strongly about this, you can't have a growing and vital community, a growing and vital society, if that community is not physically healthy. And that goes for everybody. And what you would end up with if the Medicaid expansion were curtailed, done away with in Arkansas, the Republicans here don't have a plan to take its place any more than the Republicans up in Washington have a plan to replace the Affordable Care Act.
Well, it's definitely a concern.
They just want to get rid of it.
Well, it's definitely a concern to me, although I do not qualify for Arkansas Works, but pretty much I have a private insurance that I pay out of pocket for. But, you know, if not for the pre-existing conditions, I most likely, and the plan is not cheap, and I probably couldn't even afford it at all. And my deductible is like ridiculously high just to make it even somewhat affordable. And of course, if you follow my personal page on Facebook, and I've also shared this on the station page, you know, I have been dealing with some health issues of my own, especially, well, thank God that they didn't find prostate cancer, but,
yes,
you know,
sir.
they're still looking, you know, for potential other things. So, you know, I'm not trying to be gloom and doom, but let's just say something happened to me and I can't get treated, then I would no longer be here. And I don't know, somebody else may be sitting in this chair talking to you, maybe Quabila, or I don't know. Who knows?
Well, let's not claim that, okay?
Well, I'm not saying I claim that.
Okay.
I like sitting in this chair, even though I'm trying to give it back to Quabila, but she won't act right. I'm just playing.
And ma'am, let me digress just a minute, because I skipped over something, and you were talking about the pre-existing conditions that might accompany or might be aggravated by COVID-19. To my mind, under federal law now, any of those things would still be covered, unless the Republicans try to tamper with it and do away with protection for pre-existing conditions again, which they'd thoroughly love to do, because their insurance industry lobbyists push them to try to do that. They only want to insure healthy people and take premiums from them day and night, and never pay out anything in terms of benefits. That's an ideal world as far as insurance people think. I deal with insurance people every day in car wrecks, and that's their modus operandi. That's their training.
Derek Coleman says November 10th is that date, and he also says Dan Sullivan is trying to get rid of it.
Say that again. You said it a little quickly.
I'm sorry. I was reading the Facebook comments. Derek Coleman says November 10th is that date. I believe that's talking about the Supreme Court case I mentioned, where the ACA will be challenged. And then he said Dan Sullivan is trying to get rid of it.
Yes, he is trying to get rid of it.
All right.
And if he were in the Congress, I'm sure he'd vote to get rid of the ACA completely nationally, which I find beyond belief, simply because, you know, I've grown up here basically. I came here as a 27-year-old lawyer. I'm sitting here at 70 years old. I met my wife here. Our children were raised here. One of them is buried here. I love this city. I love the people. I want to see this place grow and prosper. People can't grow and prosper if they're sick and if they can't get health insurance. End of story.
All right, Kubia, did we talk Stand Your Ground?
Well, I brought it up in reference to other controversial issues, but I didn't ask him directly about that issue.
All right, so Jim, your thoughts?
Okay, I'm off track for a second.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
We just wanted you to kind of
I thought I answered her question.
Well, you may have a monitor so many things.
Let me make another point that she brought up, and I think it's an important one, about people who have had COVID. I don't know if you heard it, but yesterday on KSU, on one of the NPR segments, there was a long discussion about patients who are referred to as long haulers. Now, these are people who, for some reason, they develop COVID. They may get treated, they may not get treated, and they get over the COVID symptoms. But then they begin to develop some really other disturbing symptoms, chronic respiratory problems, cognitive problems such as word finding that ordinarily you would see if somebody was developing atherosclerosis, where they were becoming demented, or where they were developing the onset of Alzheimer's. But something is happening in portions of the brain in some patients who have been exposed to and otherwise recovered from COVID. So there are going to be long-term consequences of this, long-term medical and therapeutic needs for people like this. And those things cannot be treated as pre-existing condition. That's my 2 cents worth anyway.
All right, Quabila.
Okay. I want to get on to education. There's something I'm talking about with another candidate. Looking at Arkansas curriculum, and I don't know it fully because I don't have a child in school right now, but having conversations with people who do have children in school, they're a little frustrated. Even some of the teachers are frustrated with the curriculum. And I know some of it comes down from the federal government. However, on an Arkansas level, what can we do, or what can you all do if you are elected to ensure that our students are getting the best education and it's not mundane and repetitive, and they are able to be competitive on a global level with other students when it comes to getting jobs and finding those sustainable careers and things of that nature.
Let me say this: my best advisor and my worst critic in that area is my wife, because she holds a master's degree in education, and she taught in the Jonesboro school system for about 9 years before we met and got married. And even after that, she opened and ran her own private day school business for another 6 or 7 years. And she was dealing with children at the very outset of education, at pre-K. And I think that it is absolutely critical to have curricula that stimulate the mind early on. I'm not an education expert, but I will say this: in the time that I've taught both full-time and part-time at Arkansas State, I have seen the negative results of a kind of dry as dust, rote education that those students were exposed to when they were in primary and secondary school before they reached college. I can remember having to switch from essay type examinations in business law and in constitutional law over to multiple choice and true and false, because for the life of me I couldn't read the exam questions if I gave essay type exams. There was no sentence structure, there was no proper punctuation. In many instances, the handwriting was so abysmal, so bad, I couldn't read it. And I was always heartened and surprised, because then there were a large number of Nigerian students here. The Nigerian students had grown up in a British educational system, which still emphasized the ability to read as the foundation to comprehend what you were reading. That still emphasized the ability to write and to verbally express yourself, because those were the things that were going to help advance you and move you along in life. And I was disheartened by the fact that I didn't see that in my students from small towns, mainly here in Arkansas, whether they were black or white. These things were missing.
All right, got a question from Facebook. J.D. Hagler says, Burton referenced the lawsuit against the Arkansas Department of Health a few weeks ago and was perfectly happy with how the governor was running things. Why should anyone want to elect a potential legislature who's fine with legislating and just letting the governor do it for 8 months of crisis? And you got about a minute 45 to answer that.
I suppose my only answer to that, sir, is that we do have a crisis in this country. The governor is exercising what in constitutional law is referred to as police power. This is the same lawful authority delegated to a governor to the executive in the state to handle other crises that arise, whether it was a flood or civil disorder or a tornado where the National Guard and the Department of Public Safety had to be called out. The governor has been doing his best to try to, I think, strike a balance between the economic needs of people in this state and the physical health of people in this state. And I think he's done a pretty fair job of it. And I would note, I read recently that Jonesboro's sales taxes for 2020 at the end of the fiscal year had exceeded those for 2019. So I'm not sure that the argument about wrecking the economy is not a canard.
Well, Jim, we're going to have to leave it there. Get ready to go into our second break. Excuse me. Speak with Jim Burton, candidate for Arkansas State Representative District 53. Don't go anywhere. Stay with us, and we will be back with more. This is Community Conversation on KLEK 102.5 FM.
You're listening to Community Conversations on KLEK 102.5 FM. We'll be right back.
We're back with Money Matters. I'm Alfred Edmond Jr. When is the right time to combine your finances in a romantic relationship? Opening joint bank accounts, co-signing on an apartment lease, and sharing access to your credit cards are all examples of financial intimacy. Engaging in it prematurely can have major negative consequences for your financial health. Here's what you need to consider. Can you both talk about money freely? Until you can have open, safe, and honest discussions about your financial beliefs, philosophies, fears, habits, and goals, it is unsafe for you to be financially intimate. That goes double if you can't talk about money with one or both of you feeling judged or attacked or becoming angry or resentful. Speaking of financial goals, be honest. Are they complementary or in conflict? Can you travel the world in early retirement while supporting your partner's efforts to start a new business? Financial intimacy could place both goals, as well as your relationship, at risk. I'm Alfred Edmond Jr. for Money Matters, a product of American Urban Radio Networks.
Made possible by the Jonesboro Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, focused on joy in our sisterhood, power in our voice, and service in our hearts. www.jonesboroalumnidst.org.
Money Matters is brought to you by the Guide Right Jonesboro Kappa League, a nonprofit organization that guides young men to a life of achievement. Kappa League Jonesboro on Facebook, Jonesboro_Kappa League on Instagram, and JonesboroKappaLeague@gmail.com.
Money Matters is brought to you by Bancorp South, offering checking, savings, loans, credit cards, and wealth management. www.bancorpsouth.com or 870-972-9800.
KLEK thanks the staff of Life Strategies Counseling Incorporated for helping people through hard times in life, such as depression, family issues, stress, abuse, and more. They offer counseling and therapy for all ages, individuals, families, and groups. They are located at 1217 Stone Street. Phone number 1-866-972-1268 or online at lscihelp.com.
Arkansas Early Learning is accepting applications right now for childcare. We have locations all across Northeast Arkansas. Applications online at arearlylearning.org. That's arearlylearning.org. Right here in the community at no cost. Arkansas Early Learning, offering kids a head start.
Arkansas Early Learning is a nonprofit organization.
Coronavirus. Knowledge is power.
Most of the U.S. remains on lockdown due to the coronavirus pandemic, but the president, some governors, businesses, and other Americans want to reopen the country as soon as possible. According to experts, though, it's not something that can happen all over the country, and it cannot be done overnight.
It is not going to be a light switch
that we say, okay, it is now June, July, or whatever, click, the light switch goes back on. It's going to be depending where you are in the country, the nature of the outbreak that you've already experienced, and the threat of an outbreak that you may not have experienced. So it's going to having to look at the situation in different parts of the country.
The director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, Dr. Anthony Fauci.
Coping with coronavirus.
From the Power News Radio Network.
KLEK 102.5 FM salutes small businesses. Small businesses promote local character and success, keeping money in the local economy, local jobs, entrepreneurship, community well-being, and so much more. Contact us today to learn more on how your small business could be featured on KLEK for as little as $25 per month.
Shout out to Tax Refund Firm, DBA Cool Cuts Taxes, tax preparation and holiday and refund anticipation loans, 1411 Franklin Street, Suite 6, Jonesboro, 870-520-7470, 870-331-8311.
And now back to Community Conversations on KLEK 102.5 FM.
Now we're back on Community Conversations on KLEK 102.5 FM with our guest, Jim Burton, Democratic candidate for Arkansas State Representative District 53. We'll go to now Kabila for our next question.
Okay, well, we touched on quite a few issues. I guess I would like to get Mr. Jim's take on, okay, if you are elected, I know sessions probably won't really start until January because you have to get sworn in. Or again, no, please correct me and inform the residents how that process works. Let me just back up there.
Okay, which process?
Okay, once the election is over, who's ever the elected person, when do you take office and start work?
Well, you take office on the first day of the session. The legislature is sworn in by the Chief Justice, who I went to law school with. He's a good friend of mine from up around Salem. And on that first day, my understanding is largely ceremonial, but that week, you're going to get committee assignments. There are already going to be bills that have been pre-filed with the clerk of the House, so that there's already going to be, you're already going to have a plate of work to get down to from day one.
Okay. I want to ask this question, and I brought it up a little earlier, because this is something we're seeing, and I understand people subscribe to different parties. That's fine and dandy. However, we have to keep the people first. We have to, okay, if you're on a committee with someone and things are just getting really heated, discussions not going anywhere, I mean, what can possibly be done? I mean, I understand you have to vote one way or another. If you feel that you just cannot vote on an issue, can you explain, or do you have any inside knowledge on what happens then if you're sitting on a committee and you just feel like I can't vote yes, no on this?
Well, the principal function of a legislative committee is to take testimony from people who are hopefully more expert in some subject matter that is at the heart of that legislation. Whether it be criminal law, whether it be social welfare, whether it be public health, whether it be budget. And the obligation of a legislator, I think more than anything else, is to listen, and then to digest, and then to try to offer your own amendments if there are things in that proposed legislation that you find unpalatable or that you simply can't support. I don't know if that answers your question or not. A bill has to get out of a committee successfully before it can go to the floor of the House anyway.
Let's go to the Facebook. Let's go to the Facebook comments because we're saying it's going to be winding down soon. J.D. Hagler says 8 months of economy shutdown is not the same as a flood, but I appreciate the answer. Derek Coleman says the economy only put on hold for 4 months, not 8 months. If this country had a real leader and really shut down the country for 8 months, perhaps we would have 200,000 deaths and counting. The sad part is he is still downplaying it. All right, so Kubila, let's go back to you.
Okay, well, I appreciate your answer. If you are elected, Mr. Jim, what could you do possibly going forward to try to engage more with the constituents of the district that you will be representing? Because, yes, people have a responsibility to get information, but some people simply do not know how to navigate the different websites and systems in place.
Well, I would be more than happy, if you're talking about reaching a broad audience, I'll be more than happy to make myself available at any time to this station, to KAIT, to KASU, KAIT Channel 8, to the local, the various mediums, and the Jonesboro Sun, to answer questions and to do it on a regular basis. I think that's the obligation of a representative. Otherwise, he wouldn't be called a representative, because the fundamental feature of the office is that you're there to speak on behalf of the people who have elected you, and to try to offer, as well as your own opinions, a synthesis of the opinion of the people who sent you there. And that's a first obligation of a representative. And if I saw there was a need for it, and a willingness of people to come out on a Saturday morning, for instance, at, I don't know, some meeting place at Arkansas State or at the Chamber of Commerce up the street here, I'd be more than happy to spend my Saturday mornings talking to constituents, because I think there's an obligation to do that.
All right, so Jim, we got about 2.5 minutes left. Is there anything else that you want to say that we did not cover?
Kansas, I think we covered the waterfront. I think that the change that needs to be made in this legislative district is right now, my opponent has principally concerned himself with philosophical issues. He got something passed, or he offered something called the American Law for American Courts, and it has something to do with Sharia law, and I don't fully understand it. Let me say this, I don't know how many times he's been to court. I've been to court about 4,000 or 5,000 times in one capacity or another, either defending somebody or representing an injured person or prosecuting somebody for the city. Or handling a divorce. I've been to court a whole lot. And at the tender age of 70 years old, I've never heard a single word from the Quran spoken in an Arkansas court. Now, these are the kind of things that my opponent has concerned himself with. I'm what's called a pragmatist. I'm a practical man. I have spent my life mainly trying to get money out of insurance companies for injured people. And that teaches you early on a lot of that philosophical stuff they taught you in law school. You can throw right out the window, and you better figure out ways to negotiate and to debate and to win in court and to get practical things done for your people. So, yeah, my concerns are with the police. My concerns are with the fire department. My concerns are with the streets and highways. Oh, by the way, I've been on the Chamber of Commerce Transportation Committee for a number of years now. Mainly, since I don't fly, I'm not a pilot, I don't deal with the aviation
Jim, I hate
side.
to have to cut you off. We got to stop. We got 20 seconds
I'm a
left.
practical guy.
All right, we're practical. Well, and then we definitely appreciate that. All right, this has been Community Conversations. The KLEK does not endorse, support, or oppose any candidate for office. These interviews are provided for informational purposes only, but exercise your right to vote. November 3rd, y'all. It'll be here before you know it. It's the Community Conversations on KLEK 102.5 FM.
Thank you for listening to Community Conversations on KLEK 102.5 FM. a program focusing on the people working to make the Jonesboro community a better place while offering viewpoints from all sides of the issues. The views expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of KLEK 102.5 FM, the voice of Arkansas Minority Advocacy Council, or our underwriters or sponsors.